Y los invito a compartir lo que es la primera entrevista del embajador de los Estados Unidos aquí en la Argentina, Noah Mamet. Después de la visita de Barack Obama tuvimos una conversación en la residencia del embajador. Hablamos de todo, también de los Panama Papers, de Milagro Sala. Escuchen el reportaje.
Ambassador Mamet, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Since Macri came into office, the bilateral relations turned around. What happened? What changed so much between Argentina and the United States since Macri's in office?
Well, I think Argentina in general has re-engaged with the world, and I think there was real excitement, and people feel positive about that. And I think President Obama, and he spoke on the phone after he was first elected, and then he went to Davos, if you remember, with Massa, and they met with Vice President Biden, and they had a great meeting there. And I think there was just real energy to reestablish positive relationships. We can do a lot together, and I think they're looking for opportunities to work together. So we were thrilled. You know, President Obama was here recently, and I think it was a great trip, very productive, really positive, and you saw the chemistry between not just the presidents, but the first ladies as well. So it was really unique that the whole family came here from Washington, and they loved it. They had a great time.
But this positive feeling has to do with economic reforms Macri has been pushing forward. What's exactly what, because Obama praised him a lot during his days here in Buenos Aires.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's not just economic, although that plays a big part of it. While President Obama was here, there was a big conference just a block or two away. I think there were 800 people or 1,000 people, Argentines who work for U.S. companies, figuring out ways how can they expand their business. And they announced over $3 billion of new investments right here in Argentina. I think that's going to grow. I think that's going to be much, much more in the years ahead. But that leads to jobs and a better economy. There's ways for us to work together to lower barriers, to increase trade both ways, to have Argentina export more to the United States. So I think there's lots of opportunities. I mean, beef, for example. Last year we announced for the first time in over 10 years that Argentina would export beef to the United States, and anytime I see ranchers here or cattlemen, they're really excited about that. So I think there's these new opportunities, and that is what led to a really positive summit.
But what happened during Cristina Kirchner mandate? Why weren't all these things going on then?
Well, that's old news. I mean, I think we just want to stay focused on the positive and these new opportunities, because as President Obama said, I mean, we need to think about the future. He went to Cuba right before here, and he talked a lot about the future of the region of Latin America, and there's all these new partnerships I think we can form either together bilaterally or regionally too. So we're really looking to the future, and we see all these new opportunities.
And with relation to the region, now how are you looking at Venezuela? Because one of the things, one of the big changes in Argentina's foreign policy since Macri came in office has to do precisely with Argentina's stand in front of Venezuela, now criticizing things related with human rights. What's the view from the United States at Maduro's government?
So not just the United States, but many countries were heartened to hear President Macri, when he was running for president, talk about human rights, and that countries like Venezuela and others cannot jail political opponents. And that's a bad thing to do. And I think that caught the attention of many people around the world. So we both believe in human rights, and you saw President Obama talk about human rights a lot on this trip. I think he and President Macri see eye to eye when it comes to human rights. And interesting, Venezuela had their election just 1 week after Argentina did. I think it surprised a lot of people. The opposition did really well. So I think the different political parties need to work together in a nonviolent, in a constructive way, and we're following it very closely. It's very important.
Talking about human rights, Human Rights Watch, another human rights organization here in Argentina, when President Obama came, they said they were at first invited to the memorial of the desaparecidos, and then they were uninvited. That's what Horacio Berbisky said. And he said they wanted to hand on a document that mentioned, among other things, the Milagro Sala situation.
So as you know, the last day he was here was the anniversary, and I think it was handled in a really respectful way. We worked with Casa Rosada and different human rights groups who were invited. Obviously they had their own events that day, so it kind of complicated it a little bit. But I think what you also saw was the former publisher of one of the papers, who was a real hero during that time. He was there at the event at El Parque de la Memoria, and I think not just the photos that were very respectful and heartfelt, but what their statements, if people did not see that press conference and hear both presidents speak, I really suggest they should, because it was very emotional, it was very heartfelt, and it gave us an opportunity to talk about human rights, things that countries have done wrong in the past, but also the fact the United States, and under President Carter especially, really stood for human rights and rescued many people. So
yeah, he worked a lot here.
Yeah, and I think so that's why it was important. Some people said President Obama, should not do anything that day. We felt no, it was important to do something out of respect for the anniversary, but also focus to the future as well.
So, but you don't feel the Milagros Sala situation is like the political opponents of Maduro being in jail in Venezuela? You don't think there's a parallel there? You just, like some Kirchneristas claim, for example. That's why they wanted to talk with Obama about that too.
Yeah, well, two things. One, I mean, that's really a domestic dispute. It's really a political dispute here in Argentina, so I don't think it's probably right for me to comment directly on that, but I will say that when President Obama was here, I think you were at Usina del Arte,
yes,
and he's one of the few presidents, if not the only president in the world, everywhere he goes, he takes questions from average people, from students, from young leaders. There were 1,000 people there. I mean, the second we said it's open to the public, we sold out of tickets, and anybody was able to ask any question. And I think people really respected the fact that they're not planted questions. These are regular people. He's very comfortable answering these in a very thoughtful way. They were great questions, too.
Yeah.
And I think it was replayed on TV because people thought it was really interesting and it was very popular.
And Michelle Obama was a success.
She was great, right? And she really connected with the First Lady here as well. That event focused on women and girls and education and science especially. It's something that Michelle Obama focused on in the States, but also when she travels. It's something that's really important to her personally. And it was a great event. It was really positive energy. And then she did interviews afterward on social media. And so the First Ladies really hit it off. But I think women and girls focused on education and science in particular is a really important topic.
Ambassador, you're not a career ambassador, and you're in some way related to the Democratic Party. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the U.S. elections now. How do you feel the world is looking at a candidate like Trump? President Obama himself was asked about that at the Usina del Arte.
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask this question. It's the first presidential election I haven't been involved in over 20 years. And in some ways, I'm happy about that because I love being here in Argentina. But I'm obviously following it because, we work for the U.S. government and the State Department. I don't think I should comment on my personal opinions. Yeah. But I will say I think the American public will get it right. I think ultimately they'll do the right thing. But we have a really long process. I think it's too long. But you have to sort of wait and see how this plays out. But I've been interested that so many people here focus on it and they really watch it closely and they follow the debates and everything. Yeah. So we'll have a lot to talk about in
But
the
it's
future.
kind of scary for some Latin Americans to hear Trump talk about like building a wall between the United States and Mexico and having the Mexicans paid for that.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of interesting things candidates say. And so I will say, look, the nomination process is not over yet. I think the conventions will get great ratings because people are going to be really interested. But we have to wait to see how this goes because no nominee has been selected, and let alone the general election. But I do think there's lots of interest, and there's going to be a huge turnout. And I think the American people will get it right.
Ambassador, it was interesting hearing President Obama talk about tax havens after the Panama Papers, saying that this underscores the need that the tax havens are prohibited and why are they legal? They should not be legal. That's what President Obama said. That's the U.S. government's vision. President Macri was involved in one of those societies that turned out in the Panama Papers.
Yeah. So I've been following it. Obviously, it's news around the world right now. So we've been reading about, I think there's 11 million documents. So it's going to take a while, I think, for experts to go through all of it. And I know President Macri and Castro Sada addressed it immediately and directly, so I don't want to comment any further than that. But in terms of the United States, the Justice Department and other agencies, they look really closely at this to see if there is, any fraud or anything illegal going on. Having, as I understand it, having just an account overseas is not illegal necessarily. It's what happens with that. So anyhow, I know our experts and the officials, especially at the Justice Department, they're looking at it really closely. It just takes a while to get through 11 million documents.
Yeah. Talking about documents, how long it will take until we get the declassified documents of the times of the dictatorship President Obama promised when he was here?
Yeah, I think that was
What's
actually...
your estimate?
Yeah, I think that was really important for him to say that, and for the first time ever, certain categories of documents.
Intelligence and security.
Exactly, and there's already been a huge release in the past, but we're going to immediately start that. It's really time intensive because individuals have to read through it and declassify each one. You can't just do it as a group. So that's already started. I think you're going to see it soon in terms of step by step. We're not going to wait until it's all done to release.
Oh, okay.
We're actually going to do it as they're able to finish it. So we're
it's not
starting.
going to take like a year and a half as it was.
I don't know the exact timing, but I know President Obama committed to President Macri to do it as fast as possible, and I know people in Washington are already working on it.
He committed also to come back once he's out of office, right, as a tourist next year? Is that right?
Yeah, and as he told President Macri when they spoke for the first time on the phone, he said, look, I used to study Argentina and I studied Latin America, and he read Borges, and he said, I really am fascinated by Argentina. I wanted to come here. And he came here, but he had a lot of work to do too. So when he left, before he got on Air Force One, he said to me, I want to come back. I'll have a little bit more time after next January. So I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back soon.
So you imagine engaging on areas besides investments of U.S. companies in Argentina? What else are the priorities on your bilateral agenda with Macri's government from now on?
Yeah, so we signed 2 agreements on security as well, one on travel and tourism. But the security one, I think, is important because,
No, since you mentioned that, will the Argentina have the waiver visa program back ever?
I was getting to that. So let's talk about that first. So what we did do here at the embassy, we limited the number of people who have to come in for an in-person interview. So if you're younger than 16 or you're older than 65, no longer do you need to come in to get your visa. We're trying to make it easier for people, so it's a step-by-step process. And Argentina reduced the fees for Americans to travel here, which will be great because you're going to have more tourists here. It'll help the economy grow, not just in Buenos Aires, but around the country. I'm like an advertisement for Argentina because I love it here, and I've traveled to 10 or 12 provinces, and everywhere I go, I tell people, this is a great country, you should come visit. So I think travel and tourism is a huge opportunity for the economy of Argentina, and I think you're going to see more Americans, but more people from other countries too come visit.
There was some concern that not all the agreements were made public by all the agreements that were signed.
It's all online.
Online security and
everything is online.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all public. We believe in transparency. There's no reason not to. It's good for both countries. And the security one I mentioned, we're now sharing security information, which is good for both countries. We're fighting terrorism, but we're also figuring out ways to work together to fight narco trafficking, which is a big deal. And when I travel, I talk to governors and obviously the federal government. This is a big deal because crime goes hand in hand with narco trafficking. So we're working together on best practices, what's worked for us and what hasn't. We can learn from each other. So expertise is a big part of that.
Do you also have the law in the States that you can shoot the planes that are not
that's only for like national security. And as I understand it, that is also the practical.
Only in very limited situations in the States.
Extremely limited. This is for national security.
That's the way it used to be here. Now they changed the law and it's all the time.
I don't think it's all the time.
Well, under certain circumstances, obviously.
Yeah, and you should talk to the Ministry of Security. But as I understand it, because it was an important clarification for us, it is on national security. It's not just on small narco trafficking planes, which need to be tracked, and we need to go after those who are involved in this criminal activity. But it's not just shooting down planes willy-nilly. I think there was a little bit of a miscommunication in the press about that. So I think they're going to clarify that in the weeks ahead.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you. This is great.
Bueno, después la entrevista con el embajador, quédense ahí, pues ya estamos en el living.